definition. When we read that for our definition, we want to put down an exponent has a base that indicates the number of times, we talked about that at the beginning, that the value is being multiplied. So when we look at our base, anytime we are looking at that base, anytime we look at our base, as we look at that, what we are looking at is that tells us how many times. So this is going to be n times we have to multiply it. The exponent tells us the number of times. It says exponents represent, as we are looking at that mathematical shorthand for multiplication, numbers expressed using exponents are called powers. Older calculators and computers use that caret key to represent the exponent. And I know on some of your calculators, and I would make sure whichever calculator, when we are taking a look at these, that you are prepared with to take your quiz, and I think we let you use calculators. Yeah. No, because we ask you to keep them positive. So we aren't using your calculator on the quiz. So you need to make sure you're understanding what it means. So things to be aware of. We've talked about this earlier. Things you need to be careful for. The difference of something in a parenthesis squared and not a parenthesis. So it says often to apply exponent values to a negative, that base value has to be enclosed, meaning we're taking -4 times -4 to get 16. The exponent applies to the entire set of parentheses it's attached to. But if a base value is not enclosed in parentheses, that exponent applies only to the number it's attached. So when you really think of -4 to the second, this one is really almost telling you to do -1 times 4 to the second. So you just got to be careful that you understand that. So because the answers will come out differently. One's going to be -16, one a +16. Okay? So 0 exponent. So we are looking at each of these rules and we want to put it down in symbols. So in symbols, the 0 exponent is telling us anything to the 0 power equals, everyone? Anything to the 0 equals? 1. Anything to the 0 equals? 1. Because I get really frustrated when I'm correcting this quiz and I have something to the 0 power and people tell me it's either that number or they'll tell me x. So all numbers, not 0, raised to the 0 power are going to be equal to 1. Anything to the 0 power equals 1. Our negative exponent, the key thing we want to associate with our negative exponent is what word, everyone? Negative exponent is reciprocal. So you're going to see it written, I'm going to write it 2 different ways here. So the first way they said x to the -m, but I also want you to keep in mind if we would have 1 over x to the -n, that is going to be x to the n over 1. And you can look back in your notes when we had those ones with our negative exponent. It just means that we're taking really the reciprocal as our key word. Moving from the top to the bottom or bottom to the top. So looking at that word reciprocal as we are looking at that. That's our key word when we look at that problem. So that next one, the product rule. What do we do when we take the same base, if we're thinking about it? The same base, x to the m times x to the n. We are doing adding our exponents, so they show it as m plus n. If we're writing it out in words, we are going to say, when multiplying, bases are the same, add our exponents. When multiplying, bases are the same, we add. So quotient, yesterday that was our new one that we were working with. When we have a quotient, what are we doing with our exponents? That's when we divide. Dividing means subtract. Multiplying, you add. Dividing, you're going to subtract those exponents. So if we kind of put these two together because sometimes they're nice and easy to remember. When you multiply, you should be adding. When you divide, you should always subtract the two. Key thing when you do that division part, they say x can't be 0 because remember, if you divide by 0, we get undefined anytime we divide by 0. So power to a power. This is when you have that x to the m raised to the n, or x to the n raised to the m. That's when you are going to multiply those exponents. So we're multiplying our exponents when we do that. And it gets really easy when they're like towards the end of yesterday's homework, like that 61 to 77. When there's just so much stuff, it's like, oh, what do I do first? So if you can think of simplifying, like inside your parenthesis and breaking things down and getting one, and then applying some of these rules. So the order, sometimes people do the order in, like someone might do power to a power first, someone else might have simplified first. There's different ways to do those. That next one, product to a power, that just means when I have two things inside the parenthesis or three things inside the parenthesis, everything has to be raised to that power. So product of a power just is telling us each factor has to be raised to the power. That would be the key thing I go with there. Each factor has to be raised. And the same thing with our quotient one. If you have a numerator and denominator, they both have to be raised to that power. So when you are looking at those, kind of making sure that both the top and bottom get raised to the power. Here, each factor gets raised to the new power. Our multiplying, subtract, adding, reciprocal, and then always 1 as we are taking a look at that. This is Monday. It's supposed to be Friday except for a snow day. So quiz is Monday, page 16, or there's 16 questions on it. So there's no other way to tell you what you're going to see than it's going to be pretty much from F1 through what we just did on F4. The problems from the book. There is a worksheet. So it's going to mostly be going back and applying all these rules, right? It's just going to be all rule application. So last night's homework had a lot of those things where you had to do multiplying, division, power to a power, like number 77 that was done up here on the front board. They combined all those things, and that's going to be the key thing. So it's always going to be simplified. That means no negative exponents. So the key thing when I look at this on your quiz, if you leave a negative exponent, I have to mark it wrong. So it can't have no negative exponents. And we say that right on the top of the quiz, no negative exponents. Sometimes if it's a bigger problem, like I'm going to ask you to leave it as a power. So if I ask you to leave the answer as a power, that means instead of saying 7 to the 8th power, I'm not going to have you calculate it, right? Because you don't have your calculator. I'm not going to have you multiply 7 out 8 times. I'm probably not going to even ask you if you have 7 to the 3rd, because I don't want you to make a simple mistake. I'm taking 49 times 7. So if we're not using our calculators on that, what part, do you know the rules that you did up to that? So that's what we're going to kind of be looking at. So your homework tonight is on page 446. It's 1 to 20 all, as you are looking at that. And, but I do want you to take a look up here. I have, it's like question 26, 27, 28. So I would say as we are doing those, so up on the board I have 1 to 20 plus do 26, 27, and 28. So we're not doing the 21 to 25 that are on that page. So looking, making sure, so they say, can you simplify this and explain? And what I did is I will be attaching those answers afterwards. So this was the F4 in the workbook. I didn't assign it. So I just want you to know if you need more practice with that division, you could take a look at this F4 that was in your workbook or notes that you were looking at. So take a look at that. It's not assigned. You don't have to have F4 done. What I do want to take a look at is, so I'm using my rules because there's no exponents, right? So I'm taking 2 times 4, which leaves me with 8. And I have a to the 6th and a to the 1. And when we multiply our exponents, we should be adding them. So the base is the same and we multiply. So this is going to give me with a to the 7th, right? My denominator, I have 8a to the 3rd. 8 divided by 8, 1. A to the 7 over a to the 3rd, 7. We're going to be subtracting our exponents when we divide. Okay. So the key thing is they might start ugly. So when I look at number 73, you won't have one this hard on the test. 1/4 it adds to the -2 divided by 1/6 to the -3. You should have left yours up also when we were doing that one. So as we are looking at this, what's the reciprocal of 1/4? 4 to the second. What's the reciprocal of 1/6? 6 to the third. Don't make it harder than you have to. You don't have to do the reciprocal of the whole big fraction thing, right? So now, if I'm thinking about this, now I could mark multiplying by 4 to the second, but keeping in mind 4 to the second means 4 times 4, and this is 6 threes. So 2 goes into each of these. 2 goes in here twice and in here 3 times. Oh, this 2 can go into 6 3 times and in here once. I can go 2 goes in here twice and in here 3 times, right? So if I am multiplying this, I have 2 divided by 27 as I'm looking at it, right? So there's different ways you could have done it on your calculator also if you were looking at 73. 75, my hint on 75 is that you simplify inside your parentheses first. So you have this whole ugliness of a to the negative 1, b to the 3, c, divided by a to the second and b to the fourth, and all of this is to the 6th power. Inside, we want to look at our powers of a. So I have a to the first and a to the second. Simplify and get 1a before you do your power to a power. So a to the second over a to the 1. I'm going to think of that, and I'm going to take 2 minus a negative 1 because I'm subtracting my larger power. I'm going to have a to the third. I have b to the third over b to the fourth. Again, go with where your larger power of b is. It's in the denominator, so 4 minus 3. We're still subtracting, but that gives me b to the first. And the c stays, so I have 1c, and all of this is to the 6th power. And that's a much easier problem if I get it down to just one letter number inside the parentheses. So that's my hint as you're doing some of these ugly ones. So c to the 6th, a is going to be to the 18, and b to the 6th. So again, the key thing as you are working on this page, think that you won't be having your calculator. Yes, this is simply division when you have negative 25 divided by 5, 6 divided by 3. So simply working on those problems and doing that. What's on the quiz for Monday, go back over those rules, look at them if there's any other questions to make sure, and then